welcome. Um, it is wonderful to have everyone here. I've got a few folks that are with us in the sanctuary. I have a few folks that are with us on Zoom. If you see me looking down, it's just because the screen's over here, but the camera I know is up there, and then there's a whole crew out here. If you are with us on Zoom and you chat a question, I will make sure I try to look for it. You can use the raise hand function, but because there are only 6 of you or 5 of you that are on Zoom, if you just say, Rabbi, I've got a question, that will be fine. Same thing goes for you all in here. Is there someone else coming in? Is there someone else coming in? Okay. If you all see someone, just let me know. And if you all raise your hand, please feel free to ask questions. My goal tonight is to kind of go through a big picture of how Jewish time is put together, how a Jewish calendar and a sense of time is together. Next week and the week after, to really focus on just one part of it, which is the Jewish festivals. And I will kind of show you where that is as we go through this big sense of Jewish time. But I'm going to start first with the words of Psalm 133. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. How good and pleasant it is that we can gather here to learn as a community together. Now, one of the other things we can certainly also do is there is a blessing for study. There is a way we say thank you to God for the opportunity to study. It's a simple blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Adonai, our God, monarch of time and space. You have made us holy through mitzvot and allowed us to la'asok, to soak in, to engage, to dive into the words of Torah. And I say that because study in Judaism was said the world studies stands on 3 things: study, ritual, and acts of loving kindness. Study is the first one. And we are even told if 2 people sit to study together, the divine presence rests between them. Study is a spiritual action in Judaism. It's one of the ways that we see where we are in time and space and connect with the divine and connect with other human beings. That was just my wallet falling out of my pocket. Do not worry. But study is the way that we connect with other human beings. And if you've read any Martin Buber and you know about I, thou, connecting with human beings is connecting with the divine. Okay? So we are now talking about time. Judaism is a religion of time more than space. We are sitting in a space, in a physical location. Judaism expends a lot more energy saying it doesn't matter where you are, it matters when you are. Because there is a sense that we want to sink ourselves in space and also in time. That we want to find ourselves in a space in a particular way, doing particular things at particular times. And I'll explain a lot more of that as we go. But here projected for you, you see this little piece from a poem I read very often in times of memory. We are together in remembrance, and the laughter of memory mixes with tears of loss. And we recognize how quickly time passes us by without waiting for our struggles, successes, or our dreams. Let this moment awaken within us a sense of urgency, a respect for the unceasing motion of time. This is something you do share in moments of loss, but I share it with you now because that's part of Judaism. A large part of Judaism is saying the creation is going on around us. How do we figure out what the order of stuff out there moving around in time is so that we can be in sync with that time out there? And you will see that as we continue to go through a few different pieces, a few different things. It's all about being in sync and being aware of the motion of time. And we were just a moment ago talking about anniversaries and birthdays and the order of things. Judaism also acknowledges the anniversary of a death. And so that's one of those things, is when we have suffered a loss and when we've suffered a death, when we feel finite, we connect to the infinite flow of time. So what you are seeing before you, these are two of my favorite, these are two different pieces of art, but they're really actually the same thing, okay? So if you look, you will notice that they both have a 7-branched menorah. Do you see the 7-branch menorah? You will also notice that they both have a shofar. And then on the left-hand side of the menorah, you will see that they have both have an etrog and a lulav. Etrog and lulav are the branches and the citrus fruit that we use at Sukkot. Before the Star of David, the Star of David has been a Jewish symbol for a couple of hundred years. It has not been a Jewish symbol for that long. These are 2,000-year-old symbols of Jewish life. If you went up, that one is on a floor of a synagogue building. The other is on the wall of a synagogue building. These were the symbols that said, hey, you've entered a Jewish space. And what are they? They're all 3 symbols of time. A menorah is Shabbat. The shofar is the Yamim Naharaim, the days of awe. And the etrog and lulav is a reminder of the festivals. Yes, Veronica. Yes, I can. So the 7-branch menorah, the shofar, the ram's horn, and the etrog and lulav, the branches, and the citrus fruit that get used at Sukkot. And when we study Sukkot as part of this class, you'll definitely get to see an etrog and lulav. Yes, Charlie. So it's new moons, it's the new year. It's a different cycle of time than the etrog and lulav, and it's a different cycle of time than Shabbat. It's a symbol of that system of counting time.
Rabbi.
Yes.
On Zoom, we cannot hear the questions that are being asked where you are. Can you please say them out loud so we can hear the question as well as your response?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Somebody asked me to point out, so I'm going to do that now for you here. This right here. Oh, you can't see that, can you? Oy. Okay. Can you all see so somebody asked to point out the menorah, the shofar, and the etrog and lulav. Do you all see them? Because I'm at a different computer and you wouldn't be able to see them. But the lower right-hand side of both is the shofar, the ram's horn. In the middle is the menorah, the 7-branch menorah for Shabbat, the 7 days. And then on the left-hand side is the etrog and lulav, the branches for the festivals. Okay, and then Charlie was asking about the shofar. The shofar is used at new moons. It's also used at the high holy days. It's one system of counting time. The menorah, the Shabbat, is another system of counting time. And the etrog and lulav is another system of counting time, where you think about a watch that has date, hour, and seconds. Those are all different movements of time, right? And this is the same kind of thing. Okay? Questions? Did that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the first function of Jewish time, when God began to create the heavens, the earth was unformed and void. There was darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind from God sweeping over the water. And God said, Vayehi or, let there be light, Vayehi or, and there was light. God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. There was evening, there was morning, a first day. The beginning of creation is setting time. The cycle of light and dark is about time. That's how obsessed with time we are. Okay? Before Christopher, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Incidentally, Ferdinand and Isabella said Spain shouldn't have a single Jew. There is some evidence that Columbus stopped in Portugal, consulted with a rabbi who was the one that helped him figure out the astrolabe so he'd actually be able to navigate. Jews are obsessed with, we as a culture and as scholars are obsessed with astronomy. We want to know what's going on up there. And so the order that's up there, we can sync with down here. There's also another obsession with in here with our physical body that we want to be in sync with what's going on out there. And that will come up more and more. Ellen, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I was trying to find the unmute button. So my question is, you bring to the fore that, you know, it's time. Well, then what about where Isaac Luria did the shattering of the sparks? And was that because he had a penchant for astronomy, or was that, you know, is so that in that way we could understand the creation of the world?
Okay, so Isaac Luria is a Kabbalist in the 16th, 17th century in Sfat. He's a mystic. And he said that God was everything, and God contracted, did Simsum to create a place for creation to happen. And there's a series of vessels of light that God created. God's light emanated, filled one vessel, overflows, goes to the next one. One of the vessels has a flaw, and kaboom! Explodes out, shattering the vessels and sending sparks of God's holiness and shards from the vessels, and that's creation. The Big Bang Theory, right? And that our goal is, as Jews, is to come and put the vessels back together and collect the shards of light, right? And so I don't know that, I don't know if how much Isaac Luria is really talking about the skies, the astronomy at that point as he's describing creation. I think that's much more of a spiritual story for him than it is talking about the Big Bang Theory, even though, you know, it does describe the Big Bang Theory. And so I don't know that that's necessarily the obsession with time and space that you're seeing here, if that makes sense. Okay? So you can see the same thing. Let there be expanse in the midst of water, separate water from water. God made the expanse, it separated the water which was below, the expanse from the water which was above. God, it was so. God called it sky. There was evening, there was morning, a second day. So now we're starting to get creations of space, and again, it's marked by time. Here's the important thing with Jewish time. When does a Jewish day start? When does the calendar flip in Jewish life? Sunset. No, sunset. Jewish time goes from sunset to sunset, right? Because you can see it says there was evening, right? So it says there was evening and then there was morning. So Jewish time goes from sunset to sunset. So as we're talking about all the holidays, if the first day is on a Monday, it really started at nightfall when there are 3 stars in the sky on the day before. Yes, Steve.
So Hebrew word for day is yom.
Yes.
How do we know that yom is a 24-hour period, not longer or short?
Well, you have Erev and then you have Boker. So it doesn't use the word. So it doesn't say day here. It actually says there was morning. Yeah.
Rabbi, we can't hear the question.
Sorry. Hold on one, Steve, hold on one. Steve, hold on 1 second. So Steve is asking about the words. There was evening, there was morning. Yom Rishon. I'll get to, okay, hold on 1 second. So Steve is asking about the language here. It says Vayhi Erev. He's asking about the Hebrew. What are the words here? So we have Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, Yom Rishon, no. Yom Echad, 1 day. And then you have Yom Sheni, the 2nd day. So you're trying to, the simple answer to your question, he's asking, how do we know that here on the 2nd day, it's a 24-hour day? And the basic answer that I always give is humans aren't around until day 6. So we have no idea what time looked like before then. The meaning of Yom, right, doesn't, until humans are around to see it, experience what it is, what do we know what it is?
So it could be an age.
It could be. Yes, there is flexibility here. And part of what I'm saying is this is what sets us up for the calendar as we use it now. So Steve is asking a creation question. How do we, if it's 5,784 since creation on the Jewish calendar, how do you explain the dinosaurs, for example? And one of the answers that's given is either A, God put the bones there for us to find, or, which, you know, that could get interesting, or there were what we don't know what the sixth, before humans show up at the very end of the sixth day, we don't know what creation was like. And so it could be a whole different way of understanding time and space that we have no idea. Okay? Very, very fair question. And that's really not going to help me. I have to grab the right clicker. So just so you can also see this, what am I showing you here on the screen? That is the seats, right? This is the seat that are for the prayer shawl. A prayer shawl is just a shawl. It becomes a talit, a prayer shawl, when you add these seat. It is, the shawl is really just a vehicle for these guys. Why is one white and why is one white and blue? Charlie. The sky is blue. Water is blue. Ah, okay. So you are looking at a clock. That's right. This is a clock. You know that it's dawn when you can tell the difference between the blue and the white. Even if there are clouds in the sky, or sort of if there are clouds in the sky, this is an ancient form of a clock that was telling you when that you crossed a threshold, and I'll use that word threshold a lot, when you've crossed a threshold into time, and when, again, we want to do rituals at particular times, because we're trying to sync with the flow of time through creation, and so that's why we have part of the reason with seat and why they would have a thread of blue on them, so that you can differentiate and tell the difference between night, darkness and light. Okay. So one of the reasons we have the white is because when the temple was destroyed, part of our tradition is we stopped knowing how to make the blue ones. And so they said, we're not going to have the blue ones because we're going to acknowledge that we have lost the temple. And so for a long time, people did not use techelet, those blue ones. It is starting to come back. You're starting to see more people. There are some people that know how to say they know what the dye is, all kinds of interesting discussions around it. I actually have a couple of talitot that I have tied with techelet too, because that's the power of a tzitzit, is really the differentiation between the blue and the white. The number of knots, and you have to realize this is a Jewish ritual artifact. I'm giving you one interpretation of it. Every good Jewish ritual object has multiple interpretations, and the same thing goes for the knots. Theoretically, there's 613 knots for the 613 commandments. There are all kinds of ways, but that's another class. If you are interested in that class, that's actually on the Temple Beth Shalom YouTube channel. If you go look at the Omer class from 2 years ago, I did a class on tzitzit. And I can also share that link with you all if you're interested. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so here again, so 6 days we have, and on the seventh day, what did God do on the seventh day? And so what are we going to do on the seventh day? We're going to rest. Okay. So here you have Shabbat, the heaven and earth were finished, all the right. On the seventh day, God finished the work, the malacha, the work of creation, and God ceased all of that malacha. God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done. So just like God, we take that day of not doing malacha, and there's a whole, Shabbat is a whole nother field of study, which we absolutely can do another time. I'm going to give you the kind of the short version of it. just for a taste. One of the things we're going to see is that everything else we study and talk about is a natural cycle. Cycles of rain, cycles of the moon, cycles of the harvest. Everything else is cycles that happen in creation without our input. Shabbat is a human divine construct. There is nothing in nature that is necessarily following a 7-day cycle. It is all about humans counting. And it's really kind of fascinating that we have kind of that both and, where we have to have that discipline to count 6 days of work and take a 7th day of rest. Okay? Now, part of Judaism is rituals, threshold, and bookends. What's a threshold? A threshold is a boundary, right? That we cross over a boundary. So Judaism does a lot of marking of physical thresholds and thresholds of time. What's a bookend? So I know a lot of you have Kindles now and don't have those book things. So this is a book, okay? It's got pages, it's got a cover, because I know some of you are not familiar with those. If you get a lot of books together, they could fall over. In fact, it's happening on my feet right now. And so you need a bookend. Wait a second. I think I have one. Aha! I have a bookend. Okay, so this is a bookend. So if you put this like that, it'll hold up your books. Okay? We do this a lot in Jewish life, that we bookend, that we put two acts of ritual on either side of an action to hold it together. So for example, when we read Torah, we read a blessing before the reading of Torah, and we read a blessing after the reading of Torah. That's your bookends. We say a blessing before you eat, and then you say a blessing after you eat. Okay? You say a blessing before you go to the bathroom, and you say a blessing after you go to the bathroom. I am not making that up. Okay? Because if you don't go to the bathroom, you don't survive, right? So, that's part of Judaism is interesting, the number of bookends and the number of thresholds of saying you are entering a physical space or in a space, an area of time. Do a ritual so that you feel the change of texture. And when I say texture, if you've ever been to the Holocaust Museum in DC, they do an amazing job. They have metal floors and brick floors and cobblestone floors. They have lots of different floors so that as you walk, you feel it on your feet. Judaism is trying to do the same thing, saying, I'm entering Shabbat. It's not just Friday night. Let me do physical rituals with my senses, kinesthetic action, so I feel that act of crossing the threshold. You light a candle, you drink wine, you tear the challah. We have lots of rituals, so I feel that experience, and I know that moment of crossing the threshold. When we come out of Shabbat, you have the same thing. So the image on the left is it is on the left for you also. That's so cool. So on the left is the candles that you light for Shabbat. On the right is Havdalah, and Havdalah literally means to separate. That's the threshold ritual for ending Shabbat. Shabbat starts on Friday night at sundown, and you will see some calendars with very precise times based on where you are of when you light the candles. There are other places that have a little more flexibility. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then on Saturday night, when you can witness 3 stars in the sky, that's when you can do Havdalah. And what is Havdalah? Havdalah has, again, the wine, but it has a spice box, and it has a braided candle. if you're supposed to have a different relationship to fire on Shabbat, then you davka precisely have a flame with multiple wicks so that you've got a mamash, a flame for Havdalah. And when you do Havdalah, how do you extinguish the wine? Sorry, did I just say that? Aye, that's because I haven't had enough. How do you extinguish the candle? You dip it in the wine. You extinguish it in the wine. Once you've extinguished a candle in the wine, what can you not do with it? You can't relight it until it dries out. Shabbat is over. It's closed. You can't go back. And in fact, the spices, I always like to tell people, are smelling salts, right? Because you're coming out of Shabbat, you have to go back to work. My wife hates the Bengals, but their song, just another Manic Monday. So we need a little bit of spices and a little bit of wine to pick us up. You drink from the wine before you extinguish the candle in it. Yes, Veronica. Yeah, so Veronica is asking about why 3 stars in the sky. Because once you see 3 stars, you know it's not some fire off somewhere. You know it's not your eyes playing tricks on you. If it's 3 stars, then you know it's dark. Does not matter which 3 stars. Yes, Charlie, it could be a planet. Okay, so here's another sense of Jewish time. On the left is the phases of the moon. Shabbat is a human construct. The moon is one of our biggest ways of counting time. And the moon, and we're actually, if you look on the handout page, we're now over here. Okay. With the moon phases are a huge part of Jewish life. Jewish time counts from new moon to new moon. Okay, so the first day of the month, the beginning of the month, Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month, is on the new moon. We just had a new moon. We're probably in a crescent moon now, based on the day of the month. And the 14th day is the full moon. So you've got about a 28, 29 day cycle. And we go new moon to new moon. How'd I do? Aha! We are in the first quarter moon. I was doing pretty good. Okay, so what you see in terms of the months here is interesting because you see at the top it says Nisan, dry, and then you see the Hebrew word for Nisan. Trust me on that. It is the Hebrew word for Nisan. Nisan does not mean dry. I will explain that in just a minute. But you have Nisan, Er, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, and Elul. Nisan is in the spring, but it's the first month. Okay? You with me so far? Jewish time, in some ways, in the Bible, starts in the spring. Yes. It starts on the new moon somewhere between March and April. Okay? But, when is the Jewish New Year?
In the fall.
In the fall. It happens before Sukkot. It's Tishrei, the 7th month. Wait a second. The new year starts in the 7th month? How's that possible? Judaism. Okay, so you see that there are the Tishrei 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can even count. This is so cool. Okay, where's Adar? There's a double. Oh, Adar. I lost Adar at the end. There's another month at the end, but I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, and you see Tishrei says wet. Okay. Aha. So Jewish time runs from new moon to new moon. We use a lunar calendar. It also follows and acknowledges the hydrological cycle in the land of Israel. It starts to rain after Sukkot That's the beginning of the rainy season for the fall. And it rains up until Passover in Nisan. And then it's dry. If you start planting around Sukkot, and you finish and you start harvesting the grain during Pesach. Yes, Veronique. Who cares about the Southern Hemisphere? Judaism for 4,000 years has been Israel-centric. One of my favorite stories, Passover, as we'll talk about as we keep going forward, Passover is a celebration of spring. It happens in March and April. April 1st, and this must have been 98 or 99, I was a student rabbi in Billings, Montana. What's the weather like in Montana in April? It's cold and snowing. And I'm at the Yellowstone Country Club doing a Passover Seder, talking about the beauty of spring, and there's a foot of snow on the ground. And that's part of Judaism too. And there's a space regardless of time. We count time according to what's happening in the land of Israel, even as we acknowledge that we might be in our own spaces, but we will always want to have that taste and connection to Israel. It is a fantastic question of what do you do if you're in the Southern Hemisphere? You go with this, even if it's reverse. Great question. This actually came up when they've had Jewish or Israeli astronauts. How do you count time if you're on the International Space Station and the sun is rising multiple times a day? Okay. And that actually was asked. And there are all kinds of different pieces of that. Okay. Let's come back to our conundrum here. The first month is in the spring, but the new year is in the 6th month in the fall. How is that possible? Aha! Why use one calendar when you can use two? Okay, now here's the thing. In the land of Israel and in Egypt, the time starts in the spring. In Babylonia, Mesopotamia, time starts in the fall. And so part of our tradition comes from when we were in the land of Israel and more connected to Egypt. And part of our sense of time and space, and the names of the months, by the way, come from Babylon, from that Mesopotamia. And so if you look in Torah, it says that the year starts with Aviv, with spring in the spring. But if you look at how we count time now, we're using a Babylonian system. Why use one system when you can use both? Okay? If that isn't confusing enough, it is. So, and ultimately, that reality that we're using both an Egyptian, a hybrid system of both Egyptian and Egypt and Mesopotamia, but think of where Israel is. It's right between them. That doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you know where we are, if it's Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, as long as you know where we are and what month it is, it doesn't matter where it comes from. I just find it interesting in the way of kind of understanding that this is a system that is both ancient. I'm talking about time in Torah. We'll see more of that. But in the same breath, all of this sense of time is also melded together over time. I'm going to give you another place where we use two different systems at once. This is a lunar calendar. How many days are in a lunar year? For 12 months on a lunar calendar, how many days would that be? It is not 365. It's actually about 354. It's about 10 days shorter.
Huh.
So why just in Islam uses a straight lunar calendar? That's why Ramadan bounces around. Why use one calendar when you can use two? Use a hybrid lunar solar calendar. Okay? So Jewish calendars are a lunar calendar, except we intercalate it. We have a buffer so that we keep the fall holidays in the fall and the spring holidays in the spring. 7 out of every 19 years, we add an extra month. We're going to have that coming up so that we can keep the lunar calendar in sync with the solar calendar. And what that means, and I apologize, it is not on this, on the PowerPoint, but below Shvat is a month called Adar. That is the month of Purim. And when it is a leap year, we have an extra month of Adar. You have first Adar and second Adar. And yes, if you're born in the first month of Adar or the second month of Adar, and then you just celebrate your birthday in the month of Adar when it's a non-leap year. It's kind of like February 4th, 5th. Wait, what do we do? The February 29th. Sorry, February 29th every 4 years, but we have a full month of it. We are going to have a leap year this year, and that means the High Holy Days will still be on the 1st of Tishrei, but the 1st of Tishrei will be in October on the Gregorian calendar. That's why our calendar gets wonky in relation to the Gregorian calendar, because the Gregorian calendar is a straight solar calendar, and ours is a hybrid lunar solar calendar. Our holidays float about 10 days every year until you get a leap year, and then it shifts by a month. And that's why you can have Hanukkah at Thanksgiving or at New Year's. Okay? I have books, but there's also a wonderful website called Hebcal, HEBCAL.com, and it has a perpetual Jewish calendar on it, and it will even tell you if you put in your birthday, what the Hebrew date of your birth and the Torah portion of your birthday was. HEBCAL.com. There is, I believe, an app. I've never used it. I just keep going to the website. And for our folks on Zoom, I just put it into the chat for you. And Hebcal is a wonderful resource. It has Torah portion stuff. It has the holiday information. It is a fabulous, fabulous resource.
Rabbi?
Yes.
So how did the Torah portions then get meted out? I know that it's over a 3-year cycle, but doesn't that get confusing then?
Okay. So Ellen, you've asked another question that is related to time, and it's a wonderful question. So Torah portion, there are 54 Torah portions, okay? And they go in order. And at Simchat Torah, which we'll talk about in 2 weeks, we flipped the Torah cycle, and that means we finish Deuteronomy and we start Genesis again. And we read all the way from Genesis to Deuteronomy. Each week is assigned a portion, a section of Torah to read. And those are fixed. If you go on Hebcal, it will say that to this week is to Parshat Bo, which is in Exodus, and here are the chapters and verses you read, okay? In a leap year, there are some of those Torah portions, like Kedoshim Achrei Mot. There are some that are doubled up. So during a non-leap year, you would read a double portion, and in a leap year, the double portion gets split, and you just read Kedoshim, and then you read Achrei Mot. It gets a little wonky because in Israel, they celebrate the festivals, which we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks, for 1 day shorter. And so if you have a holiday that happens around Shabbat, it can throw it off, but there's always ways that it somehow catches up between Israel and the diaspora. Did that answer your question, Ellen? Okay, now here's the other thing to realize. Ellen said, wait, we do a 3-year cycle. We do a 3-year cycle, but we go from Genesis all the way through Deuteronomy. But where we do the 3-year cycle is in any 1 year. If you use the 3-year cycle, you read only a third of the Torah portion. So right now we are in this year 2 of a Torah cycle, of the Torah reading cycle. So we're reading the middle third of any Torah portion in our congregation. Other congregations do the full reading. On Hebcal, you can see the full reading. There is no reason you can't do the full reading, but we just focus on a smaller section when we do our Torah study or when we do our conservative Shabbat morning service. Okay? And again, you would see that on Hebcal. I'm guessing a lot of, and again, it's the same thing with the Torah portion of the week. The Torah portion of the week is one of those things that says time. Now, here I'm going to give you another place where this gets a little confusing. Right now, we are reading the story of the Exodus. Are we celebrating Passover right now? No. The Torah portion goes in order from Genesis to Deuteronomy. It doesn't care where we are in time. It's its own clock. But when we get to Passover, at the time of Passover in the month of Nisan, on the 15th day, we will read from the Torah the stories. We'll go out of order of the Torah portion. So you have one clock that is the clock instead of 1, 2, 3. It's Shemot, Ve'era, Bo, Yitro, Bishalach. There's one clock that counts time by what Torah portion you're reading as you go from Bereshit to Zot HaBracha. And there's another clock that is saying, here's what happened on this day in Jewish history. Did that make sense? So, and I said this, well, let me keep going. Let me get to the holidays too. Okay, so the Torah is one way of counting time. I know where I am in the year based on what Torah portion I'm reading, not because that happened at that time in history, but because that's the order. There's another system that says this is what's happening at this time in Jewish history. Okay? Here's to keep it a little more interesting. By the way, in Jewish life, there are 4 New Years. Why have one New Year when you can have 4? Okay, you have the 1st of Nisan in the spring, which is the New Year for kings and festivals. The 1st of Elul is the New Year for the tithe of beasts. The best way I can describe this is what happens on April 15th. In American life, what is April 15th? It's tax day.
Tax day.
Right? It's tax day. Some of these are tax days that, and I'm misspeaking on some level. When do you count your taxes? Your taxes are counted from from January 1st to July 31st. We just have to pay the taxes by April 15th. Turn in your tax return by April 15th. This is the time that you count. So on the 1st of Elul, that's when, if you had cattle, that's where you would go and count your cattle to know how many you have and how old they are for making your offering. Okay? We're coming up to this weekend. This week is the 15th day of the month of Shvat. Okay? That is 2 B'Shvat. We'll talk about that a little bit, I think, in a few minutes. That is the New Year of the trees, right? Because in Israel, winter's coming to an end. The sap is rising. Now's the time to plant. And you want to plant in such a way that you know the age of the tree, because you pay your tree taxes in ancient Israel based on the age of the tree. You can also only take fruit from a fruit tree after a certain number of years. If I plant on Tu B'Shvat, I give myself an extra year of age so I can pick earlier. Okay? When can you pick fruit from a tree that doesn't bear fruit? Never. That's the point. Okay. Sorry. Veronic's just looking over my head trying to figure this out. Okay. So the 1st of Tishrei is the... Right. So you have the 1st of Shvat is the New Year for the trees. According to Beit Shammai, Hillel says it's on the 15th of that month. Okay? So 2 rabbinic houses, 2 rabbinic teachers. It's kind of like the Yankees and the Red Sox. Okay? Hillel is one group. Shammai is the other. Shammai says, so Shammai says that we're going to do it on the new moon of Shvat. Hillel says, no, wait for the 15th, because the 15th is the full moon. Let's do it on Shvat, on Tu B'Shvat, on the 15th day of Shvat. And we follow Hillel. Okay? And you're all nodding, which is good. What Kate's now shaking her head. Why are you shaking your head, Kate? What's beyond you? They're disagreements. They're disagreements among the rabbis of which when a holiday an observance should be observed. And you have to ultimately follow one. The cool part is we know the disagreement. We know the minority opinion and the majority opinion. We actually honor both of them, even if we're going to follow one. Okay? It's a huge part of an important part of Judaism. Okay? Did that help? Okay. So, this is, if somebody asks me what is my favorite prayer, this is high on the list. Okay? So this is one of the prayers we say in the morning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sekrivina lahavchin ben yom uben laila. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has given the rooster the wisdom and understanding to differentiate between day and night. Why is that so important? Who does that mean time belongs to? The rooster is external for me. That means creation is telling me what time it is, not me deciding what time it is. It's saying I, human being, am part of a greater creation. I have to fall in line with the cycles out there, not the cycles I tell it. It's a realization, let me be tuned into the cycles that are out there. That I am part of that, which is kind of fascinating in our world of electric lights, that we kind of lose some of those cycles because we can sneak around them because we have flashlights and light bulbs. Now I'm blanking on his name. He wrote a whole book about walking the Appalachian Trail, Bill Bryson. Yeah, so Bill Bryson wrote a beautiful book called Home, where he's in England for a period of time and he goes room to room and talks about how we as humans kind of created the rooms of a home. And one of the things he points out that I absolutely love is that the light bulb in your refrigerator gives off more light than all of the lights put together in the pre-electric light bulb age. If you look at all of the flames in any house, it put off less light than just the light bulb. We have so radically changed our experience of the world with electric lights because we see things differently. That's when we look at some of these cycles of time, it's a reminder of how much we cheat them. And I don't cheat could be a problematic word, how much we can ignore them or go around them when they are so much a part of who we are as human beings. Okay? That's kind of the idea of Shabbat. Get away from the world of creation and get, as Abraham Joshua Heschel says, to the creation of the world. Okay? Okay. So I mentioned this earlier that you've got both Babylonian and Israelite Israelite Egyptian influences with our sense of time and calendar. Okay? And here this is the Exodus. This is Torah. This is some of our very origins. We do things not in space, but in time. God said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt. This is this week's Torah portion, by the way. I clearly planned this. Okay? Wouldn't that be so cool? This is this week's Torah portion. This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of your year. Speak the whole community and say, on the 10th of the month, each of you shall take a lamb to the family, a lamb to a household. Okay, so that's a beginning of Jewish time. On the 10th of the month, you start cleaning out your house. We'll talk more about those rituals next week when we get into the actual festivals themselves. But just so you can see it, how old this is, Judaism started doing things in time. It doesn't matter where we are in space, you can always do time. That's the incredible thing. It goes with you. Okay? So here is a marker of time. Now, we're going to be talking, so if you're looking at the handout, and if you're on Zoom, don't worry about the handout. I'm going to give it all to you here. Okay? I'm about to show you the pilgrimage fest. What am I even looking at? I don't even know what I'm looking at. Okay, I'm going to show you the pilgrimage festivals. We're going to then talk about the high holy days and then the other stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start with the pilgrimage festivals because that's really the backbone of Jewish time. As we are counting time, it is the flow of Jewish story. Now, here's the other thing. You have the calendar, which says you start with Rosh Hashanah, and then you go to Yom Kippur, and then you go to Sukkot, and then you go to Hanukkah, and then you go to Tu B'Shvat, and then you go to Purim, and then you go to Passover, right? That's the cycle of the holidays that we have. That's how we go from holiday to holiday in calendar. That is not the order of them in history. Okay? Sukkot happened a few thousand years before Hanukkah. Purim happened a few thousand years after Passover. So the holidays happen in the calendar, not in historical order. So you can talk about them in historical order and in calendar order. They're two different things, and that's okay. That came up one year. Somebody was like, wait, what are you talking about with time? Okay? So the pilgrimage festivals. You're going to notice some categories here. And as I said, we're going to really get into Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot next week. But I wanted to give you this big frame of Jewish time. So as we talk about it, you'll see how more of this fits together. Okay? So Passover is so what's the history piece? It's the story of the Exodus from Egypt. When does it happen? It happens on the 15th day of the month of Nisan. Okay? What's the moon doing on the 15th day of Nisan? It's full. A lot of our holidays happen on full moons. It's a lot easier to get together for a party in the ancient world on a full moon. You can see. There's more light at night. No candles are going to light it up like the moon. Okay? So you're going to see a lot of our holidays happen on the full moon, in part because you know it's full, right? You also get 2 weeks of saying, oh, here's the new moon. Let me see it, witness it. So I make sure that I'm doing stuff on the full moon. Okay? So I have a history component. I have a lunar component. We also have an agricultural component. The barley will be ready to harvest at the beginning of Passover. It's the beginning of the grain harvest for the year. Okay? The environment. It's the beginning of the dry season. What do you not want it to do when you're harvesting grain? You don't want it to rain. You want the grain to dry out so you can harvest it so it doesn't get moldy. We arrived in Israel in early June, the year Jill and I lived there in 96, 97. We did not see a cloud in Jerusalem until Sukkot. And then 3 days after Sukkot, it started to rain. It's really pretty cool. We'll talk more about that. There's also a text component, Song of Songs. Okay? Song of Songs is the erotic romantic poem in the in the Hebrew Bible, in the section called Writings. And it's talking about a man and woman falling in love and living happily ever after. It is said to be an allegory between God and the people of Israel. It's also a fertility chant, because that is part of what you're doing at this time of year, is hoping that you're going to have a good harvest. It's also the spring. What do you want to have happen in the spring with your animals? Sex, fertility. So you have baby animals, right? What did they sacrifice at the beginning of the Exodus? A lamb. They were having the new growth of lambs. Okay? Poor thing. Okay? Oh, they're adorable. And tender. Okay. So, rituals. We'll talk more about those as we go on, but each holiday has its particular rituals that help it tell the story. All of the rituals you're going to see play into this. They're going to say what's happening with the water, what's happening with the moon, what's happening with the harvest, what's happening with our story. They all help us tell the story. Okay? Shavuot. So 50 days after Passover, we have the Feast of Weeks. What is 7 times 7? Is 49. 50 days later, this is Shavuot. Okay? The timing of the lunar cycle, it's the 6th or 7th, okay, of the month of Sivan. So you're in a crescent moon, but what it's really is 50 days, 7 full weeks from the Exodus from Egypt, and we are told that's when we arrived at Mount Sinai. Okay? Agricultural cycle, it's the beginning of the wheat harvest. The text that we read, the book of Ruth, because the book of Ruth is set at the wheat harvest. Who is Ruth's great-grandson? King David. Okay? And King David is going to be the line that leads to the Messiah. Shavuot is the giving of Torah. It all works out. Okay? It's also seen as a kind of wedding where the people of Israel are renewing the covenant with God. Sukkot. Okay? So this is if Passover is at the beginning of the year in spring, in fall is Sukkot. It's the 15th day, the full moon during 6 months later. It's the fall harvest of the 5 of the 7 species. So olives, pomegranates, dates, figs, and grapes. Woo, I got them. Okay, those are the 7 species. Wheat and barley are the other 2. They're all being harvested at this time. It's also the general produce harvest. It's the beginning of the rainy season. We read Ecclesiastes because we're confused in rain. Is it good? Is it bad? It's so weird. It's also an acknowledgement in terms of history of the wandering of the people Israel for 50 years and God's protection. And we'll talk more about this, but if you want God to make it rain, you have a picnic and you go camping. Okay? Jews do believe obviously, in Murphy's Law. What? That's when you make the hut, because if you go out into a hut, you're daring God to make it rain. Okay? We'll talk more about those in the next 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks, we'll talk about those pilgrimage festivals, but you can see some of those frames that we'll look at of the different rituals, the different history. Okay? So as I'm going from the pilgrimage festivals, I'm now shifting. This is the high holy days. Okay? Now, these Yamim Noraim, they are mentioned in the Torah. We do hear that there's a Yom Teruah, a day of call, and then we also hear on the 10th day of Tishrei, you will have a Yom Kippur. It does not say Tishrei. It says the 10th day of the 7th month will be a will be a day of Yom Kippur, a day of atonement. You do not need to read that book necessarily, but she describes what we do in the 6th month. In the month of Elul, you prepare for the new year. Okay? You take responsibility, you show remorse, you do acts of repair, you pledge yourself not to repeat it. Okay? You are clearing your conscience, you are repairing your relationships as you're getting ready to go into the new year, because then on the new year, on these days of awe, we have Rosh Hashanah, which is the celebration of creation, when we are blowing the shofar. What is the end of these days of awe? It ends up being Sukkot. The basic Jewish holiday story. Does anyone know what the basic Jewish holiday story is? They tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat. Every Jewish holiday has to do with they tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat. Except maybe Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Hanukkah. The Greeks tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat latkes. Purim. The sorry, not the Babylonians. The Persians. Haman, who tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat Hamantaschen. Okay? Hamantaschen. They're little triangular pastries with fruit filling. Okay? Passover, the Egyptians. They tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat matzah. Or brisket. Okay. You see what I'm saying. Yom Kippur. We're going before God to confess our sins. One of the things we don't do on Yom Kippur is we don't eat. We are feeling remorse. We are feeling our guilt. God tried to kill us. We survived. How do you end Yom Kippur? You have a break the fast. Okay? At sunset. Goes sunset to sunset. Okay? So these high holy days finish with at Sukkot. Okay? It's the same thing, even bigger though, because what do we need to have in the land of Israel in order to survive? Rain. If you don't have rain, you don't have crops. If you don't have crops, you don't eat. We work on our relationship with God and each other, and you also don't have crops if you don't have community. We work on our relationships with God and each other, getting ready because we want to be ready for the harvest and we want to make sure that it's going to rain. Okay? So Rosh Hashanah is a new year of creation. We'll have the rituals of shofar. We talk about opening the book of life. We relive creation. You also get the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. You have 10 days of repentance, 10 days of doing those acts of remorse. On the 10th of Tishrei, we have Kol Nidre, which is asking for God's protection, or renunciation of our vows and promises. Okay? We also have Avodah. We talk about the whole story and we go from creation to the rituals of Second Temple to Yom Kippur. Okay? So that we relive the whole story of creation and what it was like for our people as they stood at the temple in Jerusalem to do the rituals of Yom Kippur. Really quite interesting. We also then talk about Ni'ilah, which has to do with locking as we are closing the book of life. Okay? So you have the 3 festivals going out throughout the year, but we have this node of major holiday festival time. You're absolutely right, Veronique. It starts at sundown, goes sundown to sundown, and it is for celebrating these days of awe. Okay? Most of our holidays are in the fall or in the spring. Those are the big moments. The equinoxes are the big moments in Israel, not the solstices. Okay? Closer to the equator, equinox is a bigger deal. So that's the kind of a nutshell of high holy days. Okay, then we run into some other stuff, and that's kind of in the very center. You'll see Tu B'Shvat, which is the birthday of the trees. Okay, it's literally the Tu is Tet Vav, 2 letters of Hebrew letters. The Tet is 9, Vav is 6. What do you get when you add 9 plus 6? 15. Tu B'Shvat is the 15th day of Shvat. Bonus question for meaningless points. What is the moon phase on Tu B'Shvat? It would be a full moon. Okay? Hanukkah is on the 25th day of Kislev. I think it's fascinating that Christmas is on the 25th day of December and Hanukkah is the 25th day of Kislev. Hanukkah came earlier So I'm not sure. I think we're the egg and they're the chicken, but I don't know. I don't know why those both on the 25th. I do know why, well, Hanukkah is on the 25th of Kislev. It's related to the story of Maccabees. But I would also argue this. And again, this is where I'm trying to say, as we do these rituals, pay attention to all different layers of it. Okay? So Shammai, remember we had Hillel and Shammai when we were talking about when Tu B'Shvat was? Hillel and Shammai argued about how you're supposed to light the Hanukkah menorah. Hanukkah menorah has 9 branches. One is the Shamash in the middle, and then you have the 8 branches for the 8 days. Shammai said start with 8 candles and decrease 1 each day, because Hanukkah, he said, is connected to Sukkot, and it's connected to the rededication of the temple. And when they did the dedication of the temple, and when we do the offerings of Sukkot, you start with a big number and you decrease. Hillel said, no. We start with 1 candle and you add 1 each day because you increase, because we want to increase the light in our world. It's a beautiful, beautiful teaching. We follow Hillel. Some people do Shammai because they like the underdog. We follow Hillel. Here's the other thing with it, and this is why I share it with you, is we're talking about a sense of Jewish time. On the 25th day of Kislev is the first night. The second night is the 26th day of Kislev. What's happening to the moon as you go from the 25th day of Kislev to the 26th, 27th? What's happening to the moon? Its appearance in the sky is shrinking. The moon doesn't actually shrink. I don't want anyone saying, the rabbi says the moon gets smaller. No, the appearance of it gets smaller. It is by the time we get to the 4th and 5th candle, we are hitting the new moon of the next month. It is the new moon closest to the winter solstice. Tell me about the sunlight and darkness on the winter solstice. It's solstice, not equinox. It's the shortest sunlight and the longest night. So we're talking about a new moon closest to the winter solstice. As the moon is getting smaller in its appearance and the days are getting shorter, we are increasing the light until we get to the new month. The moon is coming back when we get to the end of Hanukkah. So we are giving ourselves light support, not life support, light support, and increasing the light in our homes as it's getting darker outside until it starts getting brighter outside, and then we're going to be okay. It's really pretty amazing that our rituals have that built in, but you have to know that our months and these days are all connected to that lunar cycle. Okay? Yes. No, that's Hebrew. And it means all of the miracles. So Arabic and Hebrew are both Semitic languages. They're buddies. They share roots, they share patterns, they share all sorts of different stuff, like French and Spanish and Italian. Like the word amore in Italian. What is it in French? Amour, right? And what is it in Spanish? So those are Romance languages, right? Because they're coming from Latin. Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, they're all Semitic languages. They're all from the same family and tree. Okay? So you are absolutely right that you are seeing things that sound like Arabic. And the reality is that's because Hebrew and Arabic are brothers or sisters. Siblings, we'll call them. Okay? What? No one's fault. Okay. Here's another piece with Hanukkah. Here's another piece with Hanukkah. You harvest the olives you harvest the olives at Sukkot. Can you just do you just stick the olive in the lamp and light it? No, you have to process it. So how long does it take to process olives into olive oil? The time between Sukkot and Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the celebration of the new olive oil harvest. You're getting your first stocks of new oil at Hanukkah. Isn't it interesting? Okay. On Purim, Steve, did you have a question?
No, no.
Okay. Purim is the 14th day of the month of Adar. Okay. We read the scroll of Esther. You'd say Al Hanisim, a different one. That was another time of miracles where God did stuff for us. These Tu B'Shvat, Hanukkah, Purim, they are not in the Torah. Purim is in the Hebrew Bible, but these are holidays that are kind of coming later. And there's more, there's more other stuff, right? We have this counting of the Omer, which is mentioned in the Torah, where it says count the days. An Omer is a sheaf of a pile of grain, like wheat or barley, in this case barley, because you're counting your wheat, your barley and wheat crop. You're excited for it. And so you're collecting them and counting those 7 weeks. During this period of time between Passover and Shavuot, when you're doing this count, where you literally count, here's the first day of the Omer, here's the second day of the Omer, here's the third day of the Omer. We do have more modern holidays like Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, which is pegged to the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto, and Yom HaAtzmaut, which is the celebration of the independence of the state of Israel, the founding of the state of Israel. It is not on the Gregorian calendar. It's when it falls on the Hebrew calendar. It would be during 1948. That is correct. But it's not May 15th, connected to May. It's whatever the Hebrew date is. Okay? We also, over the summer, will have Tisha B'Av. Tisha is 9. It's the 9th day of Av. Every bad thing that could happen to Jewish communities happened on the 9th of Av. The failure of the spies in Numbers, the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple, the expulsion from Britain, the expulsion from Spain, all sorts of different things. And that's also, we read the book of Lamentations. Almost every Jewish month has some kind of observance, minor or major, except for the month of Cheshvan. And in fact, we call the month of Cheshvan Mar Cheshvan, the bitter month of Cheshvan. How dare it not have a single observance, except for Shabbat. Rabbi, we have Shabbat every week. Thank you, kids. Yes, your son has done that to me, but it's okay. Okay. So that's kind of the calendar. Questions. That is the calendar. And what you're really hearing is there are multiple calendars, there are multiple countings going on all at the same time. Okay. You also get kind of some other interesting things. There's a beautiful book called Jewish Holidays by Michael Strathfeld. That is one that I strongly recommend. You are reading it now. So there are we could start with Rosh Hashanah, and you could go Rosh Hashanah all the way through to Tisha B'Av and count Jewish time that way. He does something interesting. He says, I'm going to start with Passover. And why do I start with Passover? Because that's the beginning of Jewish awareness as a people. We start with the Exodus from Egypt on a lot of levels as a people, not as an individual or a family, but as a community, as a people. It starts with the Exodus from Egypt. What do we do on Passover? We have 4 cups of wine. We do everything in order. God is very present in the Exodus. We finish with Purim. In the book of Esther, God is not mentioned. You're supposed to drink so much that you can't tell the difference between the hero and the villain. God isn't present. There is no boundaries. Everything is topsy-turvy. And then a month later, you go back to Passover. So you have these cycles too, theological and intellectual and spiritual and ritual cycles. Here's a different way of thinking it. You go from Passover, that God is fully present and everything is strict and in order, till we get to Purim, where God isn't present. God is behind the scenes, implied, You have to grow and mature over the course of the year to go from Passover to Purim. And I know I mentioned it to Veronique last week. Judaism believes not in a cycle, but a spiral. Each year, as you go through the cycle, when you get back to the beginning, you're supposed to be a different person in a different place, so you understand it in a different way. I've had lots of conversations with people who say, I never learned any of this stuff. I have been Jewish all of my life. I have never learned all of this stuff. Or I haven't been Jewish ever before, and I've still never learned any of this stuff. And one of the things I say is you just start somewhere, you throw yourself in, and you start moving forward. And by the time you get back to the beginning of the cycle of where you started, you will be amazed at how much you just learn a little bit at a time. Each time you go through it, you learn a little bit more. That's part of the point. When the Jews left in the Exodus from Egypt, they began that experience. A year later, God says, mark the Exodus from Egypt. You've now been free for a year. Think about what you've experienced. And by the way, tell your children what happened to you in Egypt so that when they get to this cycle, they're experiencing it and re-experiencing. This is a huge part of Judaism, that you're always growing. Think about the rings on a tree. Think about the stains in your Haggadah. Okay, a good prayer book or a good Haggadah shows the marks that as you learn more and as you gain more, each cycle you learn a little bit more. Okay, that's why it's good to have the gray hairs. I didn't have this much gray hair when I got here. I didn't have a beard at all. Okay? Questions about Jewish time. I hope you have a lot because Jewish time is incredible. A huge part of Judaism says we are always in motion. Time, things are happening around us. Stop and appreciate it. If you just keep always moving, then you will miss some of what's happening. Stop and appreciating it. A lot of our holidays are spiritual speed bumps, getting us to stop and look around and think about what we're experiencing. I wanted to go through this big cycle of Jewish time so you could see some of these paradigms and see some of the rhythms. What's going to happen next week is I'm going to start with Pesach, with Passover, and we'll go a lot more in depth with Pesach and Passover, and we'll start into the Shavuot and the counting of the Omer, and then the week 3 will then really get into finishing the Omer and Shavuot, and then we'll talk about Sukkot. There are just 3 weeks, and I'm just trying to take you, I want to really focus now on the festivals, but I thought in order to really appreciate some of the cycles in those festivals, it's better to have the whole sense of Jewish time.